Society of Pennsylvania. My name is Ahmed Sendekido. I am the Education and Outreach Director at CAIR-Philadelphia, the Council on American Islamic Relations Philadelphia chapter. It's a civil rights and advocacy organization, and I am essentially tasked to do more outreach and educational programs. And it was really last year, I don't remember exactly when, but our HSP colleagues reached out to me with the idea that they were preparing this issue of Pennsylvania Legacies, which is a publication of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. And they were preparing it on the subject Muslims in Pennsylvania, and I was honored to be invited to write a piece for it, reflecting on the current landscape of Muslims in the state, which is an impossible task for anyone, and we'll hopefully touch on today the very fact that we all get engaged in generalizations and reductionism, so we just cast such a wide net, which is something that we cannot quite escape, but which is something that we need to be aware of. In any case, so I tried to reflect on that, and what I wrote was titled "Diverse, Resilient, and Dynamic: The Muslim Landscape of Pennsylvania in 2018." And the first program that we did together here at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania was with the giants of the community. The Muslim community is so diverse that anytime you are tasked with putting together a panel, it really becomes a daunting task. Who do you include? How do you select your speakers? What is the selection process like? Does it reflect the diversity of the community itself, right? Do you have the African American community reflected? Do you have the immigrant community represented? Are there enough women on the panel, right? All these questions come because the community itself is so diverse in regards to its demographics, in regards to where multiple experiences are coming from. So in the first panel, we were able to bring together several of the leading faith leaders and community leaders with deep ties to the Muslim community in this state. And this time we are also very lucky to be joined by this panel. Now I'm sure we'll engage you in a very lively, vibrant discussion, and what will come from this panel is not going to be a one-sided conversation, but it's going to be multiple points for conversation, hopefully for even further programs here. But this is really what we had in mind. Now, with this, I'm going to talk just one more minute, and then hopefully my role for the rest of the night will be to really give the floor and just facilitate the discussion here. Is that the theme is saying young American Muslims. Young is a very relative term, right? In the Muslim faith, I guess one prophetic tradition counts if you're under age of 40, you're counted as young. So some of us, I guess, are sort of forcing that threshold over here. But I see younger faces in the audience than me. But then next to that, we have this title, Faith, Country, and Community, because what we are going to be speaking today is most likely going to be about our frustrations not only with this name, Muslim American, but also how we are seen and how we even sometimes are forced to explain ourselves. Now, before further ado, we have a great panel here, and I'd like to thank everyone for giving their very valuable time to be here. I'll start from this side, if it's okay to just introduce you the speakers. We have all seen the website, but I think it's always a good refresher. I'm not going to read the full bios. They are very rich, but it will take us quite some time to be really read through all of them. But we have Husna Hashim over there. Husna is the 2017-18 Youth Poet Laureate of Philadelphia, and she's currently a first-year student at UPenn, and she's been involved in spoken word performance and in many multiple programs. Thank you so much for joining Next to her is Melika Irfan. Melika Irfan is currently, she works with the Muslim Society of Delaware Valley. And she is the director of religious programming for this organization, which represents two mosque communities, one in Ben Salem, northeast of Philadelphia, the Muslim Youth Center of Philadelphia, and the other one in Willow Grove, the cultural center of Willow Grove. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we have Mimi Hadi. She is the president of CAIR, Philadelphia. CAIR stands for Council for the Advancement of Muslim Professionals, and she has a background in medicine and in science, and she has been active in civic life together with CAIR and other activities. Next to me on this side is Shoaib Newton. Shoaib Newton is currently an assistant DA in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, and he prosecutes homicides, and he has been working also with multiple Muslim communities. His bio on the website skipped one thing, which he originally had included before anything else for his talk. So that's something that I was going to do. And then we have Mohammed Bakri, who is, like Shoaib, an attorney here in Philadelphia with a service in multiple community organizations, including National Peace Service Center and many others. Again, very sort of accomplished background. I believe we have quite a few Bryn Mawr and Temple alumni on the panel as well over here. You have a Temple background as well, right?
Yeah, I went to law school.
And Mr. Said introduced us. Next to Mohammed is Razin Karu. Razin is a senior now at Temple University, majoring in history and political science. He also has served in the Box MSA and currently serves for the Muslim Student Association of Temple. Also has affiliations with CAIR and many other organizations. And then finally we have Mariam El-Arbi next to Razin, who's a writer, photographer, activist, and she currently works for Good Corps, and her work specializes on media work and marketing. She also has a background in international relations and community work, and has been involved in that. Our final speaker, Nadira Pierre, I believe she's on her way. We communicated, so we'll hope that she'll beat traffic and all, and will join us. Now, are you bored? Are you still with us? Okay, I'm with that. Thank you so much. And before I start, is anyone who would like to pray as the program continues, or not very seriously? Just said, please join us. Over here, we just got started and we were doing introductions. So this is, unless you made it out there for us to say your name, thank you so much for doing it. So let me introduce Nadra as well. So Nadra Pierre is, she is, are you joining us from New Jersey? She is in New Jersey, Philly, sort of. We need to be nice to her. So she has a psychology major, and she's currently at work. She has been a social media sensation, mostly using satire to bring awareness on multiple issues, especially prevalent in Muslim and African American Muslim communities. We just introduced what we are trying to do here. We'll introduce everyone, and now we'll jump in. So what we'll do is it's going to be a conversational thing, and we are going to invite Hisna and Nadira maybe to share some of their art and performance with us as we continue. We are not going to do this first talk, then this. It will be a mix. But the first question that I want to start for the panel, and this is again a conversation. Maybe I'll ask everyone to share 2 minutes what they thought about when they received this invitation. What does talking about young Muslim Americans in a young Muslim Americans panel mean to you? How do you reflect on it? And it might take more than 2 minutes, and we are going to come to these. But really, does it frustrate you when somebody tells you, hey, you're a young American Muslim, and then talk about it? I mean, is that a provocative enough question to give me? We'll start with that. Any takers? I see I'm ready to...
This was like asked directly to me, so I'll just take the responsibility.
I know you wanted to speak a little bit about it, so...
No, I think...
but yeah, we can start from there, maybe for everyone's 2-3 minutes reflection on the broader theme, and throughout that, we'll probably hash out some more, questions and conversation points.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, first I should disclose that Ahmed is married to my best friend, and I'm from childhood, so Michelle will be about this, the opposite of a deal.
She's not here, so you can.
I think the honest answer, the very, very first reaction was, okay, I can't say no because Ahmed is asking me, and I can't say no to one of my dearest friends, family friends. But then, on the other side of it, it was kind of, initially I was thinking, okay, what is this panel going to be about? Because I feel like, especially growing up in the States, as a Muslim American, I grew up, there was always panels. There's always a panel about something. And so I was just kind of curious, okay, is this going to be repetitive? What is it going to be about? And then I don't know, I think I just took a step back, and I genuinely, truly appreciate any time I'm invited to participate in any type of conversation. I think it's equal parts responsibility and opportunity. So I'm a pretty outspoken person. I think I also always kind of going against the grain. As you can see, I'm seated. I ended up on this side of the stage. It's just organic for me. Yes, I think I was excited, as I always am, to have the opportunity to participate in a conversation where, hopefully I have an opportunity to push back on certain narratives that I'm tired of hearing about, or to just have an opportunity to help guide the conversation and talk about things that I'm interested in versus constantly being reactive and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying this thing again about Muslims, or being frustrated about the, next problematic conversation because we know everything's problematic at this point. So, yeah, I think I was just excited, and I was really excited to find out who was going to be on the panel as well, because I think it's amazing. I'm at a place in my life where I'm much more interested in collaborating with people that are a part of my so-called community, and not just going into spaces and being like, oh, I'm the only Muslim here, and I'm doing all the work, but really looking into my own community and saying, who's here, who can I collaborate with, and who can I just build friendships and relationships with. So, yeah.
For 1 minute, can you reflect on, does it frustrate you being defined a Muslim American or young Muslim American?
I don't think so anymore, because truly, any labels that are ascribed to me, I'm like, okay, I'll take it, and then I'll show up, and then I'll just be myself, and people are going to be like, oh wow, that's pretty reductionist, or oh, that's not what I was expecting. So I think perhaps it used to, and I just feel a little bit more annoyed of I'm put in this box, but I think I just have a much stronger sense of who I am at this point, that any time a label is ascribed to me, I'm like, okay, I'll take it, and I'll show up, and I'll do my thing, and then, hopefully through that we'll break barriers or change perceptions or not. I think I'm a lot more invested now in having experiences that are authentic and true to who I am, who I believe myself to be, and less so about worrying about what everybody else in the room thinks and educating everybody in the room and, taking on that huge burden of being the only insert label in the room. It's like I'm just going to show up and be who I am, and I'm also very proud and honored and grateful to be Muslim American. It's not something that I see as limiting, it's just a reality. I just happen to be born Muslim, I happen to be born in this country, and so I'm going to take that and run with it.
We can quickly come down, or we can do one on this side, one on that side. Should we do that? Let's see. Oh, sorry. So we want to start and we will need to share the mics. I think there is two on that side. That's coming.
I apologize. I'm actually using the you mentioned the term being reductionist, and I feel like when I hear the term Muslim American, I definitely feel like I'm also white and I'm also black, and so any identity that is given, or any label that's given to me, I'm always curious about why is it this specific label that somebody is feeling like they need to enforce upon me, and why can't my label be all-encompassing, or why do I need a label at all as a descriptor for my identity? So it doesn't necessarily bother me, but I feel like there's so much more than a single narrative of what an American Muslim is or what a young Muslim person is. And that is very difficult to put all of these people under the same label when we have so many different backgrounds. And that's just how I feel about labels in general. And when I got the invitation to be on the panel, I was excited, so I accepted it.
Thank you. And if everyone maybe can say like a few things about themselves, the bio introduction didn't make justice to maybe what you might be bringing to the table otherwise, like your work, any aspect that's also.
I've worked with the Immigrant Center in CAIR-Philadelphia for about 5 years. So I was student group leader for the Walking the Walk youth group, which was an interfaith youth group, and I also helped pilot the Visionary Women program. Both of these programs helped, I guess, get together people of various faith backgrounds and faith traditions in order to literally physically go into houses of worship and learn about religion and religious rituals from these people themselves, rather than just clergy or the media. I got to make friends with Jewish kids, and Baha'i kids, and Hindu kids. So that's a program I did throughout high school. And more recently, I was a member of the team council for the Cultural Alliance of Greater Philadelphia. So I did art outreach. Philadelphia high school students can get into the majority of the museums here for free. So I worked directly with museums, the National Museum of American Jewish History and the African American Museum of Philadelphia. I worked with them to have inclusive programming that was geared towards young people, because people don't think of museums as places where young people are interested in being. And then I also did just like slam poetry competing in high school, and for the last 2 months I was leading for lawyer. I'm not any writers at the moment, but that's kind of like my background is more like artistic and social justice oriented.
Thank you. Okay.
So,
I think it's best if you do not only for recording but also for viral.
So, I'm not American first, as you can know by my accent. I was born and raised in India. I moved to this country in the fall of 2013. Just completed 5 years in this country just last Saturday. My naturalization. So, that's going to take me like 7-8 months. When I first moved to this country, we started living with my aunt in Warminster, Bucks County, a little far from here. And for the first couple of years, I just worked like 3 jobs. Like either I was working, either I was sleeping, because my parents had a hard time finding out they are in their like late 50s. I have a younger sister who goes to Karnataka University. She started going to school like soon after we came to Canada. And I started attending Bucks County Community College. Really didn't like the entire overall experience I had in the first 3 years from like 2013 to say like end of 2015 or something. Really didn't like it. I was like, no, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. The feeling in every sense was like, I don't belong here. Until I started meeting people, not necessarily like my co-religions or like people of my color or something. Until I started meeting people with whom I shared ideas or passions. And I feel like, no, I belong over here. But you probably wouldn't remember the first time we met and all that. At Bucks County Community College, one of the things I wanted to get started was start a Muslim Students Association. And Mariam and her peers, Ammar and everyone else at Drexel University, Temple University, they were really instrumental in helping me start an organization at Bucks County Community College. Next year I got student government and other stuff like that. I was probably the first person of color to be elected to the student government at Bucks County Community College and as the president in the 55 years of the district. And the year that I actually got elected, half the people were either Muslim, either immigrant, either people of color, or women and all that. So there was a lot of stuff that I thought was going on around me, and I just joined in that train where everyone was attending the other than right now I go to Stanford University, where I'm still the president of the Muslim Student Association, and I serve as the speaker in the student government over there, the legislative arm of the student government. And apart from that, I work for an organization called National America, which focuses on increasing voter participation across college campuses in the US, and a lot of other civil engagement initiatives, especially directed toward millennial voters, young people who live on college campuses. Because these are people who tend to get left out of the electoral process in, like, in their 18 credits and their internships and jobs and all that. So what I do for a living, in short, is getting people registered to vote, talk to them about issues that impact them. Just yesterday, my team of 10 people got 187 people registered on Sheffield's campus in just one day. And so I wear multiple hats. I try to do faith-related stuff with the MSA when I'm doing student government and other civic engagement stuff. People see my secular side, and people really cannot distinguish who exactly I am because they meet me at two different events and all, and they see me talking about two different things. None of them contradict each other. All of it is like goes together. As we can say, like, our faith teaches us social justice. The Prophet did not face any difficulties in his life until he started addressing issues of social justice. So I try to get involved with those kind of stuff, and apart from that, I have study classes. So that's about me. And
yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. We'll come back to this side. And by the way, we'll have Q&A as well. I think in our last event, one thing that we reflected later on was that we hadn't had enough time for Q&A, so this time around we want to have that too. But in the meantime, if we have very pressing questions, we'll make this more interactive, and I see a hand right away. Yes, sir.
Could you ask the panel to speak a little more slowly and louder?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, more loudly with the mic and more slowly. And?
I was wondering if you could ask Razan to actually answer the question about being Muslim American. I'm very curious about the immigrant experience perspective.
immigrant experience is like each immigrant will probably say.
Yes, right. Your immigrant.
My immigrant experience. It was the feeling that I said I don't belong over here. I don't belong over here. Until in my second year of my college, I actually started for my American history seminar class. I had to write like a 25-page paper, and I really wanted to look into the experiences of the first immigrants, so to say, and who were Muslim, who happened to be Muslim, and I went into how enslaved people who were forcibly brought over here, an awful lot of them, at least a third of them also were Muslim. So like I went into the records of University of Georgia, University of North Carolina, Chapel, and stuff like that. And I looked at their experiences and how they lived with their faith and struggled with their faith, especially in bondage. And that kind of, I didn't say that I'm in bondage or something like that, but I felt like to express myself or to live myself over here, the more I was like ambiguous, or like I didn't try to say it out loud that I'm a Muslim, I felt uncomfortable. So like, I would show up at my college, which is 95% white, a lot of people who are registered Republicans and stuff like that, into a full white kurta pajama garb and all that with a hat on Fridays and all that.
Which is an ethnic.
With an ethnic South Asian Muslim clothing and all that. So my experience was like, I want to continue living the way I lived in India, in short. But pledge my allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, if that makes any sense. So I started like integrating with people around here, organizations over here. I visited churches and synagogues with my friends. I visited like I visited Harrisburg a bunch of times for lobbying issues, for community college funding and everything. So every time I got involved over here, I tried to integrate myself in the life over here. I tried to do stuff what everyone else around me was doing, and stuff that I was also passionate about. Like, I always care about like access to education. Like, I'm 28 years old. This is my 4th attempt trying to complete my undergrad, and so I know how difficult it has been for me in both the countries, India as well as over here. That's something I'm passionate about. I don't know if that answered the question entirely, but like my experience over here was to like just be with people.
Now Jane is a PhD researcher at UPenn, so she will have many questions for you all. So we'll come back to that as a fellow academic. We work with identity and with minorities. Thank you so much for being here, Jane. But also we'll hope that there'll be quite a few opportunities to do so. Okay. Now we are coming back to this. I know we had a few more people join us. What we are doing this round is asking everyone to reflect on the idea of what does it mean to be Muslim American, what they thought when they received this invitation to speak at this panel, and then to share something about themselves that in the introductory remarks we couldn't do quite justice.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Greetings and peace. So, when I received this invitation to be on the panel, I was very honored and excited. To me, it didn't seem odd because I work at a place called the Muslim Youth Center of Philadelphia. So,
I'm sure some people have hearing issues.
okay, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, I work at a place called the Muslim Youth Center of Philadelphia. So to talk on a panel about Muslim youth was like, oh, okay, sure. When I first heard about the panel, my thought was, we are going to be talking about how we create relevant spaces and institutions and programs for Muslim youth. Thinking like, in my job, I kind of have that role where I'm doing things for Muslim youth and I'm considered not the youth, right? So then I had to be like, oh wait, he means when you talk about your own experience. And so, to me, it was just kind of that age thing to think about. Like a lot of the panelists have said, there are certainly, other ways that we can describe ourselves, right? So I was saying, we can describe ourselves by our gender, or by our race, by our religion, by our nationality, all of those things, right? And what we choose to focus on when we describe ourselves with a certain label, what we choose to focus on in that moment, I think, says something about what we're trying to get at with that label, right? But, of course, it's going to leave something out when you use a label, but I think, at the end of the day, we do sometimes have to use them to try to say something, right? Like when I'm trying to talk about my Muslim American experience, my experience being Muslim and my experience being American, I use that label. And so to me, it doesn't bother me or anything. I don't find it to be problematic. Of course, we can talk about other aspects of our personhood. That's kind of my general thought. It's a cool topic. I'm excited to talk about it.
And just as a quick follow-up, with the youth that you are serving, do you think does it click for them, this idea of being Muslim American, or is it that we are seeing that based on age cohort, of course, they are forming this idea and they are grappling with what it might mean for them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you asked me this question 15 years ago, I would have had a really complicated answer about how I'm figuring it out, and there's a hyphen in the middle, something about that. But I think it's a process of kind of figuring out how we navigate and negotiate various parts of our identity. For me, it was a challenge growing up with that and kind of coming to terms with both parts of my identity and coming to a point where I could say that I'm Muslim and an American, and those are two things. And I don't have to justify the fact that I'm both, right? And when we're working with teens and with younger children, we see that's a process that they are going through as well. It's kind of figuring out the various parts of their identity. Last year, I gave a presentation on Muslim scientists throughout Islamic history, and talked about, towards the end, I talked about a Pakistani American this was a little Pakistani American girl, and I said, "Your mama just like you." He was Pakistani and American. And like something clicked for her that like, oh, I can be both. And so you see this happening when you work with youth, probably of any background, but since I work with Muslim youth of various ethnic backgrounds, I see it happening where they see different parts of their identity clicking. And sometimes it's not just a click. Sometimes it's much more of a difficult process of negotiation, and that's the 6-year-old can say, okay, I got it, cool, right? But then, as we get older and we experience adolescence and teenage years and college, there's then a lot more questions and constant renegotiation that happens. And I don't think that's unique to Muslim Americans. I think that's true for any group. There is a constant negotiation of our identity that continues to happen.
Here, Mohammed.
So I would echo a lot of the same things that the other speakers have already discussed. So I'm trying not to repeat what they talked about, but just to give you, I guess, maybe some context and also kind of and answer the question at the same time. So I was born in Egypt, lived there for 5 years, came here in 1985, and when I came here, we came at, I think, at a certain time where I came here and had I would say a major identity issue. I didn't know what I was. I was constantly asked what my race was. I didn't know what that was because back in Egypt there was no issue with race. We were Egyptian, we weren't. And so growing up here in the States, I don't think I started actually grasping the notion of race until I was probably 15 or 16. I got into history, and I started actually figuring out, actually in Egypt, African American, but my mom is actually very Caucasian, so maybe I'm mixed. So I had an identity issue, and that didn't just stop at race, it was also a religious issue. I also was one of those individuals that would constantly question my religion, my faith, God, why we're here, the issues in the world, what's going on in the Middle East, because as an Egyptian, obviously, the one thing that you're discussed every single day is the Palestinian-Israeli crisis. So all of those things were a part of my life, on top of the fact that I also felt like I didn't have a home, because while I wasn't back in Egypt, and I practically grew up here, I was never fully accepted, or I never felt like I was fully accepted, so I didn't feel like I was an American. And I think for most of us, or for most, Muslim immigrants, for a very long time, for I guess a significant part of the time, you don't feel like you're a part of this community, or part of the American community. And it might be for multiple factors. It might be for, as an immigrant, you kind of isolate yourself to some degree, and also you're seen as being different. But when I went back home to Egypt to visit family, which we would do about once or twice a year, I didn't feel like I was Egyptian either. They knew I wasn't. They knew that I was, at the very least, they knew that I lived somewhere else, and that I grew up somewhere else. It could have been because of the way I spoke Arabic. It could have been the way I dressed. It could have been for many reasons, but they knew. And so, growing up, I had issues with identity, religion, ethnicity, nationality, all of those things. And it wasn't until I became maybe 25, 26 years old, I'm 38 now, but it wasn't until I was 25 or 26 years old that I started to actually feel comfortable with myself and feel comfortable with the idea that I could be multiple things, that I could hold on to and grasp to multiple identities. And it was fine. I could be Muslim, I could be American, I could be Egyptian, I could be African American, I could be Arab. I could be all of those things, and that was fine. And similar to what my brother here was saying, what I started doing in college was I started to wear the kufi, I started wearing the jalabiya, I started wearing those things because I wanted to highlight the fact that I was different. And I did that for a while on purpose because I wanted people to know that I was different from them. And this was my evolution to figuring out who I was. And it wasn't until maybe I was 29, 30 that I started to realize that I didn't actually need I didn't need to wear it on my sleeve, for example. I didn't have to profess to everybody what I was. And if anyone was interested, I was always willing to talk about it, and I was always comfortable to say, I'm Muslim. And at the same time, I also started figuring out that even though I'm Muslim, even though I'm Egyptian, I'm probably not like your stereotypical Muslim and Egyptian. And so I then started to deal with the fact that I was different from those that were in my community, my so-called community. And so I had to evolve through that as well. And so, just to cut it short, my history or my being a Muslim American for me was figuring out my identity for the last, for the first 15 to 20 years of living in this country. It was all about figuring out who I was, where I was going to fit in, and becoming comfortable with myself. And I was excited to get the invite because when I was informed of the program and I guess the structure of the program, the topic of the program, it wasn't going to be come here and talk about how open, loving Islam is, and Muslims are just like everyone else. There's an opportunity to talk about the differences and diversity within the Muslim community. Because I think sometimes people within the Muslim community forget about how diverse they are. Of course, people outside the Muslim community might need to learn that as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohammed. Okay, come back over again. Mimi?
Yeah.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Is the volume all right? My name is Mimi Hadi, and I'm the president of CAIR, which is Council for the Advancement of Muslim Professionals, the Philadelphia chapter. And when I received this invitation to speak, I was really honored to be a part of the panel, but it was also, I think in a way, something that was really different for me because as being the president of CAM, we have events like this where we have professional speakers come in and they talk about their professions and their lives. So I'm the one who is used to actually hosting the event and inviting the speakers to come and talk. But this is actually the very first time that I've ever been invited to actually come and actually speak about myself. So I think for me, it was maybe a little bit of a shock that, oh, I'm going to be the one speaking. So this is the first time for me. So I was excited to actually be on the other end of the event, rather than being the host, being the person who actually comes in and speaks. So it was really exciting, and I really think these types of events are important because I think there's a lot of people who have never met Muslim people, personally, and I think it's really great for them to be able to come to an event like this and just hear people, Muslim people share their personal journeys, their personal stories. But I think that's a part of breaking down, racial barriers and cultural barriers to be able to hear people's personal stories. So I think it's really great that you did this event. I was really excited to do it. And just, to give a little bit of a background on myself, I guess I probably do have a little bit different background from everyone here because I have one parent who is Muslim and one parent who's not. My father is from Hyderabad, India, and was born and raised Muslim. My mother is actually of Irish descent, and she was born and raised in a Catholic family up in Canada. I and my siblings, we were raised Muslim, but we had Christian influence because of my mom. And so maybe sometimes, my story might be a little bit different, but I can definitely identify with the last couple of speakers who talked about identity issues, because when I was growing up, there were times when I felt, and I think my brothers and sisters felt this too, is that sometimes we felt like we weren't completely accepted by either culture or either religion that we came from. because, my mom never officially converted to Islam. And so there were some people on the Muslim side of my family who had an issue with that. Although she did play a big role in our Islamic education, so we were raised Muslim, and she actually was the one who took us for our Quran lessons, and she helped teach us our surahs and everything, but because she didn't officially make the conversion, there were some people who, kind of looked at that as being a negative thing. And sometimes there were language barriers, my father's side of the family, they spoke Urdu a lot, and sometimes they would forget that we couldn't speak that because we grew up speaking English in our house because my mother didn't speak Urdu, so my father had to speak English at home. We just never really, picked up the language, and then, we might go to a family gathering or something. Sometimes they would forget, that we couldn't speak the language, so sometimes they, not intention, but, sometimes we get left out and things like that. So sometimes we felt, we were a little different, just because of that. But then, growing up, I grew up in Ohio, and in an area where it wasn't really very diverse, and so sometimes, you would go to school and feel a little bit different because, everybody in my school, it seemed like, was blonde, and I was the only brunette sometimes, and my real name is actually Saida, so when I was growing up, I actually went by the name Saida when I was in school, and back then, the only people who actually called me my nickname, Mimi, would have been just my immediate family and just people who, at my mosque, were close relatives or friends. So I had a name that was not, that people found kind of difficult to pronounce. And I looked a little different. And for me, I don't really remember ever getting asked what my religion was, but I've always been asked my whole life, what is your nationality? Because no one can ever quite place me, and so I was always getting asked those questions when I was growing up because I didn't look completely like any one particular race, so I was always getting asked that question. And so I always felt, when you're always getting asked that question, you just kind of as a child assumed, well, I must be different, because even people on the Indian side of the family, they knew what I was, but friends and people I would meet. Even in the Indian culture, sometimes didn't quite know what the nationality was. So when you're always being asked that question, you just kind of assume that you must be different, So I think, but for me, I grew up learning to look at life from two different perspectives at a young age, and with the last few percent, as I've gotten older, I feel like both of the cultures I come from are important to me, and I feel like even though I was raised Muslim, I still participate in the Christian faith as well. I feel like if I left out one faith or one, culture, I would feel like there was something missing, So like as an adult, I celebrate the Muslim holidays. I celebrate Eid. I feel completely comfortable, going to an iftar and breaking fast with Muslim friends and family. And I would feel like something was missing if I didn't do that. But I also feel completely comfortable going to, a Catholic church with my Christian friends and family and celebrating, a Mass with them when it's Christmas time, or, celebrating with them during the time of Easter too. And I almost feel like if I left one tradition out, I would feel like something was missing. Like I almost feel like that is my identity, that I feel like I identify in many ways with both, although I was raised Muslim. And I am the leader of the Muslim group, and I'm probably more involved with the Muslim faith than I am the Christian one, but I feel that the Christian faith is so important to me too.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, talking about diversity. Good. Okay. Great. You asked a question. Yes. So we are still reflecting on that very same thing. What did you think about the theme of this panel when you heard about it? How does it tie to your experience? What are some of your experiences as it relates to figuring out this idea of being Muslim American?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. In the name of Allah, all things thanks and praise be to Allah, and blessings to Allah, Muhammad Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here, and I thank you all for sitting and listening attentively. Hopefully, I don't bore you too much. I'm trying to keep it brief. I'm a lawyer, so I like to talk about it. So I'll take it in steps. First, being labeled as a Muslim American, I don't mind it at all. We all have labels. If somebody sees you do something that they think is strange, they ask why you do that, I would say I'm Muslim, right? So, for an example, I was in my office praying, and a coworker walked in, and I was in the bowing position like this, and I could hear her. She's bending over. She's like, "Are you okay? She, are you okay? Are you okay?" And you're praying, you can't respond, so I just had to keep praying. And she realized eventually I was okay. I was just praying. So I would say I'm Muslim. So I'm Muslim, I'm African American, I'm black, I'm a father, a brother. So it's a lot of labels, right? The description of who you are. Yeah, Philadelphia, Eagles fan, coffee lover. So these are descriptions of who and what you are. I don't mind it at all. You know, call me what you like. When I was asked to the panel, I wasn't excited, I wasn't upset. He's a beautiful brother. I've met him several times. I also know his wife, of course not as well as she does. But it was my pleasure to come and give, I guess, my unique perspective on this topic. And you know, I'm from Philadelphia. I was born here. Nowadays, it's commonplace to see Muslims in the city, you know, walking around any part of the city, women in all types of variations of covering, from very, very covered to, you know, less covered, whatever. Men in all different types of dress. When I was growing up, it wasn't like that. When I was in school, you know, I'm a black guy, I was a black kid in a school that was very diverse with different races. But you know, I didn't fit in anywhere because I was one of the few Muslims, right? And there were other Muslims there, but I didn't know. You know, I didn't know they were Muslims. You don't go and start Muslim youth groups in elementary school, so you're just the Muslim kid who thinks that, you know, I don't celebrate Christmas, I don't do this, I don't do that. You know, I can't have a girlfriend, can't go to this party, can't go there. So growing up, it was tough. Being in that environment, I always prayed, like, please, Allah, make more people Muslim. I need to have some Muslims around in school, right? So I knew Muslims, other Muslims in the community. It was a very beautiful community, and that was a place to go and have some type of familiarity with people, right? Because I was brought up in a very, I would say, strict Muslim household. Parents converted in the 70s directly from Christianity into what I would call Sunni Islam. So they didn't go through the Nation of Islam. They were right to Sunni Islam. So we were raised on a very strict regimen, I would call it. That's not a bad thing. It was just the way it was. So there was no leeway. You can't go there. You can't do that. It's not what we do. And I was used to it, but it was difficult. So what was my experience as a Muslim American? The American part was an obvious thing. I was always American, but being an African American, you don't have that American pride, right? That wasn't something I grew up with. We weren't having like, hey, put the flag out because it's the 4th of July and I'm proud of this. I mean, there wasn't a sense, but we didn't walk around calling ourselves American, right? We don't walk around calling ourselves black either. You live in a neighborhood of all black people, you don't use that label, it's obvious, right? So the only label I was Muslim, right? Because that's what made me different from everybody else in my neighborhood. For the most part, everybody else in my school, I stood out because I was a Muslim guy who would come in on Easter without any clothes on, who wouldn't talk about the gifts he got on Christmas, and for some reason isn't eating lunch for 30 days out of the month, but sitting in the lunchroom and his ref things, right, for those 30 days. Because fasting. So I think it's always important. It's good for me, growing up in that environment, to meet people from other experiences, right? And just recently, over the past, I would say, 4 years, I've been, spending more time with people of different backgrounds, from different countries, and meeting different people from different places and different experiences as Muslims and as Americans, but more as Muslims. People who converted, people who grew up in different countries, people who came here from different places. So I think it's good to have discussions like this, not only for people in the audience, but for people in the panel, right? So hearing these stories from these brothers and sisters who, we're all brothers and sisters in general, but these are my brothers and sisters specifically. So it's good to learn about these different stories. I think it's a way of, it kind of confirms what Allah says in the Quran about, creating people in different, that look different from each other. This is a very rough translation. It's not a quote from the Quran. But He created us different so that we can know each other, right? So it's more interesting to get to know someone who's different from you than know someone who's exactly like you, right? It wouldn't be fun to look in the mirror and talk to yourself. You'd be crazy. But when you look at to your right and you see Muhammad, and he's my Egyptian African-American brother, that's more interesting, right? And so I think when he asked me to come, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the topic was. I kind of thought I'd be here by myself, showing off my skills. So that's probably why I came, a more selfish note, but alhamdulillah for this program. I thank you for having me, and I'm going to excuse myself just for a second to pray and I'll come back.
And for anyone who would like to pray, we have a setup in the back. If you go to the back and to the right, there's a prayer ride and everything over there. Okay, so back over here to Nadira. Question? Right? All right, perfect. All right.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody can hear me. My name is Adira. I'm 22 from New Jersey, if you didn't already say that. I think my experience was a bit different. Growing up in New Jersey, my grandparents were, raised Baptist Christians. From there, they went to the Black Panther Party. From there to the Nation of Islam, and then found their way to more Orthodox Islam. And then they found a community of people that did the same thing, and we all just made this community. So I never, unlike the panelists here, I never really had identity issues. It was like, you're a Black Muslim. So when, now that I'm getting older and I hear about panels such as these and people with identity issues and they don't know where to fit, it does sound, very foreign to me because that's never been the case. It was just always like, you're a Black Muslim, go to the world, be great, But I think it's very interesting to hear, and it's very, good to know what, my brothers and sisters in faith are dealing with and are going through. But my experience was very different. And I think it's good now because we're not the only generation of people that are going through these issues. So I think these panels are more so important to people that are coming, the Muslims who are coming after us, whether they be African American or foreign or, anything like that. But yeah, my experience was very different. I was always told by my family and community members who I was, what I was, how I fit in, and that they, in a sense, because they had created such a strong knit community for me, it never really allowed me to feel like, okay, well, where do I fit in? That didn't really start until I was in, I would say, middle school to like early high school, when people would come up to me and be like, well, what African country are you from? And I'm like, I'm from New Jersey, that gets you somewhere. And they're like, how are your parents? I'm like, I know. I don't know what you want me to say. And once I got older, then it kind of started to resonate like, okay, people really have no idea that they're Black people that are like born here, Muslim. And they're like, okay, when did you convert? And I was like, I was getting asked this by like 12-year-olds. I'm like, you really think I converted in 7th grade? Not that that's not possible, but So I think my experience, I don't mind being called an American Muslim because it's part of my identity. You know, just like I don't mind being called Black Muslim because all of these labels have, as long as they're correct, have in a sense contributed to who I am and what I am and how I grow and develop in the place that I have in this country. When I was initially invited to the panel, now that I'm sort of like well known on social media, like people are inviting me, but usually I'm like, you know, the token Black Muslim. You know, like they're like, oh, there's no Black Muslim in there. And I'll be Black Muslim. So it's like I'm like a Black spokesperson. But I'm so glad to see that there are more here. So I'm very excited to be here. You know, I'm happy that I'm the only Black person here. I'm happy that there's some actual diversity. A lot of times when they have panels for Muslims, it will be like a certain type of Muslim. Like people like, we only have these type of Muslims. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I should be offended by this group or, you know, honored, but I think it's great to have us here.
Perfect, wonderful. Thank you so much. So we'll wait for other panelists to come back in. But in the meantime, maybe you had mentioned that you could do one of your poetry for us. Would that be an okay time to do that? So, it's okay? Okay.
Pretty loud.
I think she was losing her voice a little bit, so we'll try and get her a little.
We have become conditioned to turn our backs as Black Muslim bodies hit the earth. The bullet is always a catalyst for the blemish, disfiguring soft flesh and disrupting privacy. Within seconds, hemoglobin, an oxygen-carrying protein molecule, disperses red pigment. Blood stains the concrete burgundy. Blood stains our heart's terracotta lilac. Blood stains our prayers crimson. Blood stains our tundra scarlet. We wash the fabrics, hang the prayers to dry on the laundry line, watch them billow in the wind, rising upwards like the smoke of ashes. We soak our hearts up with baking soda and vinegar, making sure to rinse them well with distilled water before the children get buried with the dead people. February 24, 2016, 3 Sudanese American young Muslim men were massacred, execution style in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Multiple bullets sizzled through their bodies. The sharp smell of burnt flesh filled the air. Fort Wayne police estimate multiple perpetrators. The bullets had no grace in their flight. Corpses laid in an abandoned house, withering. Muhammad Taha Omar Ad-Mekki and Mohammed Tahrab, dead. We did not know until 5 days later. The media did not notice until 5 days later. It had long been time to recognize the intersection of anti-Blackness and anti-Muslim bigotry. Graveyards seem to be the only pilgrimage places we can afford to go to nowadays. Our traditional communities harbor an obvious racial hierarchy. We tend to lean towards Arab supremacy. Why? Do Arab American Muslim bodies attract more attention than Black American Muslim bodies? What is wrong with our hyaline protoplasm? That colorless material comprising all living cells, their melanin too prominent? Is our history too rich? Were our ancestors' slave ships and immigrant ships just worthless? Are our bodies worthless? The public is always silent. Have they become desensitized to our skin? They say, you only didn't talk like that, if you only weren't so dark, if you only pulled your pants up, maybe they would stop shooting us then. I just want them to stop shooting us. I just want justice to arrive in the Quran. قَالَ لَا تَخَافَ إِنَّنِي مَعَكُمَا أَسْمَعُ وَأَرَى. He said, fear not. Indeed, I am with you. Both I hear and I see, so I try not to fear the gunshots. I try not to fear the public silence. Instead, I try to hope only for the morning when the sun will peek through the clouds, showering down blessings of light, and I will spin and spin and spin, soaking up this light until I am drowned in it. I will swim, swirling the dry blood of my brothers in the morgue with every breaststroke. I will unearth my bloody trevor and wash it gently. I will wear the blood-stained cloak as a mark of reclamation.
Wonderful, thank you very much, Stan, for this. Okay, so we are going into a question that I think is going to capture a lot of what is said and this theme. So our theme is titled Community, Country, and Faith, and I want to ask to the panelists, in no order, anyone can take any aspect of this question. What gives you hope when you think about country? What gives you hope when you think about community and faith? And I'm starting with hope. The next question will be on your frustrations. I'm starting with hope exactly because sometimes I feel we are too dark. So I want to think first about the point of hope. It might be about any aspect, really. This is not merely on this idea of Muslim Americans. But what gives you hope on any of these? Or if you think about the youth, maybe you see something in today's youth that is giving you more hope than your experiences.
First and foremost, I would begin by saying that being optimistic is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So there is no other option but to be hopeful and be optimistic. But that's not where things stop. That's like a farm, right? You have to do stuff to build up on that hope, that level of optimism that you have. And as I come from a history and a poli-sci background, a lot of stuff that I do on my personal research out of my coursework is about how founding fathers were influenced by the faith of Islam, among other faiths, and how they tried to uphold the principles of separation of church and state, and how that would play in for all people of all faiths who live and reside in this country as citizens or permanent residents, to advance themselves in whatever faith that they practice, and also advance themselves in a civic life, right? My dad always says this, non-Muslims do not go to imams, do not go to muftis, do not go to sheikhs, right? The way they learn about Islam is through a Muslim lawyer, a Muslim doctor, a Muslim engineer, a Muslim cab driver, or something like that, right? So each one of us over here, whether they're sitting over here, they're sitting over there, all of us are teachers and all of us are pupils, both at the same time, and that's where the hope starts. And I came over here, in the last half an hour, I feel like, I learned so much, and that's the process of continuing learning and continuing teaching what you learn. If you feel that, okay, I think this is what I learned and I'm pretty sure that's what it is, right? Not halfway, something like that. And when you see other people be like, oh, I spoke to Razeen about this thing, but did you know, in so year, there were people who were Muslims and who were black and who served the General George Washington and stuff like that, and ABC, HOAC, stuff like that. And when you see this chain reaction that you already kicked in, you know that there's hope. There are people educating themselves, right? I know at least 10 people who I met after moving to this country who said that I'm the first Muslim they have ever met. So that's a responsibility. That's what it says, right? And that's also really, yes, now I have to be a good model and try at every single moment, whether they have a faith-related question or something else, I'll try my best to educate them, right? Always tell, being a Muslim doesn't mean that you have to be an expert on Middle East politics. You need not be that. I tell them, I'm not, honestly, I'm not. Ask me about South Asian politics, Chinese politics, I can tell more, but not that. So, I feel as I see people around me on college campuses and workplaces, people are actually changing. And people know about what Islam actually is, what the set of beliefs we have and stuff like that. And sometimes even I don't have to answer. One of my non-Muslim friends will actually answer. So there are 5 pillars, and there are articles of faith, you've got to believe in angels and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my god, I work on this guy, I feel like. So there is hope, and not having hope is not a good thing. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Any others on any aspect? What gives you hope?
So you're asking me that question, to be fully transparent, I think I felt the most resistance to the home and country, right? So it's country, community, and faith. And yeah, the first one was like the country one. I was like, oh, I'm hard pressed to like really feel hopeful on that piece. And I think in part it's kind of related to my more radical politics, and I just kind of find that I'm not so bought into nationalism at this point. I think there's a lot of, we can certainly be, proud of where we come from, but I think, yeah, I'm not so invested in like proudly proclaiming my Americanness. My parents were born in Libya, and I'm certainly proud to be Libyan, but again, it's like, to some degree, I feel like where we were born is a little arbitrary, and so we can certainly own our culture, own that, and be proud of it, but it's also, yeah, I don't want to go into it too far, but so yeah, but in terms of faith, community, so one thing that I didn't share too much about is what I do professionally, and so I'm in a field called social impact, or social impact consulting, which I used to joke that the only way I was ever going to end up in any kind of corporate setting was if I could basically tell everybody why everything was problematic and break down social justice issues for them, and that's essentially what I get to do now. I'm working on a project with YouTube called Creators for Change, and so a bunch of, they're called ambassadors from around the world are creating video projects that combat hate speech, xenophobia, or extremism, and I get to work with all 50 of them to do story development, to figure out the production needs, and so for me it was like, okay, that I can do. I can come up into this, corporate space and talk about the issues that really matter to me and work with people to tell stories that mean something, and that I think is the thing that gives me the most hope, and even in your customer site for poetry, that's where I find hope, when I see people from oppressed or historically marginalized communities able to put their experience into art and to create something that we can all be blessed by, and to watch it, to hear it, listen to it, and be inspired by it. That's what gives me hope. And so have the opportunity to work with almost 30 Muslims in this Creators for Change program to tell stories, and to tell their stories authentically, I think is something that gives me hope. And I see it in so many young people is this, we're not in it for the respectability politics anymore. We're not so concerned about saying things that make people comfortable all the time, but we show up and we're able to say, this is my real experience, and take it or leave it. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe that's an opportunity and an invitation to start unpacking some of the privilege that each one of us carries to some degree. So I think it's, in the creative storytelling world is where I'm finding the most hope.
Thank you. Lydia, where are you going to?
So when I think about the hope that I have, I think a lot about the resources that we have. So we talked earlier about the identity crisis that probably a lot of us experienced, having, you could say hyphenated identities, or identities that have different sides that are sometimes assumed to somehow clash, right? So there can be an identity crisis involved there. And I think when I was growing up, I did feel like there were a lot of resources for me to understand what I was experiencing, right? I didn't have like books that I could read, or websites I could go to, or films I could watch where other people were having the same experiences and say, oh, that's it, right? But now, I think there's a lot more, especially for the Muslim American community. We recently had a budget to create a small library in our youth center, and I was able to find over 100 children's books that were like Islamic in their orientation, that are in English, right? So to find 100 English language Islamic children's books was for me like, whoa, like there's so much we can do with our kids now. That's like, okay, this is about being Muslim. It's a children's book, and it's in English, and it's fun, and all these kids can now access it. Whereas when I was growing up, I'm with maybe one Islamic children's book in English. So I think that gives me so much hope to know that children can use these resources, books, the films, the poetry, all of the culture and art that is being produced by Muslim Americans, that children can access that and recognize themselves in it and have a sense of, I can get through this identity crisis because other people have done it, right? Or there's something that speaks to me about the way that this person talks about their identity. So to me, that's really helpful.
So, I guess my approach to that question is a little bit more general and not necessarily regarding Muslims in America, but I think I've had this conversation regarding hope once every week for the last 2 years now. And I'm not going to go into why, per se, but of course, we as an American society are dealing with a lot of issues nowadays. It's almost like a roller coaster ride. And so one day, I'll see something happen and I'll see all this positive reaction, all these diverse voices coming out to address this, whatever issue it is, and I'll have all this hope because what I'll see is the American diverse community coming out and expressing its opinion, an opinion that might have been muffled years ago. And now, whether it's because of social media, whether because it's the changing landscape, the increase in diversity, we have an opportunity to express ourselves, and that expression is out there, whether it's through art or whether it's through other forms. And then there are days where something happens, or I turn on the news and I see a certain part of our country, a certain segment of our country, saying or doing things that actually, instill fear in me to some degree. But what I'll say is this: so after the election. I think there was a lot of despair, and a lot of people were asking themselves, how could this happen? And what I experienced, or what I ended up, the discussions that I had more often centered around the fact that this was actually an opportunity. That we shouldn't look at it as negative or positive or anything. It's an opportunity for us to address a lot of issues that have existed in our society for decades, centuries, and so forth, that for a good portion of our community or a good portion of our society, people thought that no longer existed or we overcame. And so this was an opportunity for us to actually start to address it. It's now in our face. It's now on the forefront. We have to address it. And because of all of these things that have occurred, the dialogue today has been more vibrant and more diverse than ever before. And so that gives me hope, because I think while we might have taken 2 steps backwards, we're now in a position to actually start addressing all the issues with race, gender discrimination, LGBT rights, and so forth that we weren't addressing before because we all thought, or a segment of our population thought everything was okay because Barack Obama was elected. And so that's what gives me hope, is that now there's enough of us, there's enough diverse voices out there, and we're actually starting to address all of these issues that I think people weren't willing to talk about before.
Thank you so much. If there is no immediate follow-up, I'd like to go to the audience at this stage to get some questions from you. Do you have any questions for the panel before we move on to the point about, frustration and all? Any questions for our panel? We are talking about community country faith with a bunch of young Muslim Americans. Any questions? This is sometimes a risky business, to offer questions this way, but we have a great panel here, so yes, sir.
I had a question. Has anyone on the panel experienced any type of biasness, and how did you deal with it? How did you handle it?
Any type
of bias, or
any type of bias, Yeah. So this ties into a question that I had in mind. Was there any point at all you were like, either come on, or like you face this idea of maybe not a biased case, but in a similar way. Hey, I mean, why are you asking me this question?
Like I said, because of the community that I grew up in, a lot of young, foreign girls are coming to me and they're like, we experience Islamophobia, people are tugging my scarf and calling me names. I'm going to be honest, I've never. In 22 years of life, especially because I'm black, I'm going to be honest, because I'm black, people know they don't really want to go that route. So I'm going to be honest, they're more than likely, in New Jersey especially, they'll try it with somebody that looks like her or somebody that looks like them before they try it with somebody like me. But now that I'm older, it's a lot more implicit. They won't directly, say anything, but they'll look at me a certain way. Or I say to be a hijab is to stand out, but it's to be heard, but not really to be listened to. So it's like a lot of times they'll notice me and they'll be like, oh, she's just a Muslim girl, so we'll just let her slide. So I think the only real way that I combat it, I'm not the type of person who will convince you of my worth or try to be like, oh, look at me. I insert in the room the energy that I have, the person that I am, and I'm just going to insert it. This is the space that I'm allowed to occupy. As privileged as I may be to be here, you're privileged to have me here. So I'm bringing myself and everything that I have and everything that I contain into any space, whether it be educational, whether it be social spaces, whether it be anything. Whether I was formally invited there, whether I snuck into the back. I'm here. So whether you like it or not, you will, at the very least, you will respect me. You don't have to like it on here. You can feel some type of way about Muslims. You can go home and call me the N-word. That's your business. But in the spaces that I occupy, where I try to tell, other Muslims is don't be apologetic. A lot of times I'll go into spaces and I'll be, forward and I'll be loud, whether it be in my energy or be physically talking or whatever. And I'll see other Muslims and they'll all be together, huddled in a little corner. And I'll be like, what are y'all doing here? Come, talk to people, be social, be present. So I think that's the way that's been most effective for me. I'm not saying bust it to everywhere, throw your hijab in here or something, but I think to just have the confidence to know that you belong here. I belong in this space, I belong to be present, I deserve to be heard, and I have something valuable to add to the conversation no matter what it's about.
So, I work in the legal field, I work in public service, and obviously if you didn't know, I'm a black guy, I'm Muslim, so I'm sure, so I'll just give an example. So I would say I was held back at my employment. I knew I was held back. I couldn't prove it, but I knew it. And then I found out later on that it was true, right? I found later on, my somebody told me they were holding you back. I didn't know why, but they were, right? They didn't say why, but everybody usually likes me, so it wasn't that they didn't like me. My personality sucks. So it had to be either because I'm a black male, or because I'm a Muslim, or because, I wouldn't say outwardly Muslim. I don't run around saying, yeah, Muslim, but, certain things I don't do. Let's go out to the bar, I don't do it. Let's go do this, I don't do it. So I think the one thing I tell people of, women at my job, or black women, black males, well, I tell them to look. And I think it's because I'm Muslim and I believe in Allah, and I believe that everything comes from Allah, that look, when your time is going to come. Don't rely on these people, because if what is meant for you, the law says what's meant for you won't miss you. What's going to miss you is not going to hit you. If you're meant to get something, everybody together can't keep it from you. And I'm in the homicide unit now, and prior I wasn't. And they kept saying, Shu's not ready. They call me Shu. My name is Shuai. They call me Shu. I don't mind because my name is difficult to say. But they said Shu's not ready. And then someone came on to the job and he told me, I'm sending you to homicide. I'm sending you. He was the guy who made the decision. And he didn't. Because they fought him like it was, like he said he's making me the head of the entire organization. So I didn't get down. All I said was, look, when your time comes, be ready for it. When your time comes, don't fail. Right? Don't waste your time worrying about people holding you back. Be ready when the time comes, because eventually it will, right? And no matter who they are, they can't stop, right? 'Cause I could have made a fuss about it, holding back, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're not letting me because, and what would that have happened, right? So, what happened? Something crazy happened. A man nobody believed would ever won, and when he got in there, he made the change. And when he made the change, they told him, don't do it, he's not ready, right? Multiple people told him that, he did it anyway, and I made sure I was ready. So, when you ask has anyone faced bias or discrimination, I'm sure we all have, right? No matter anybody on the stage for whatever reason, they're female, they're African American, they're Muslim, they're Egyptian, we don't know what they are, whatever the reason is, people are going to find a way, either consciously or subconsciously, to treat you a certain way. I think growing up as Americans, we all have some tinge of racism or prejudice. It's just the way we are from watching TV, right? Even black people feel the type of way about black people from just media. We have negative ideas about each other. So, has it happened? I'm sure it has. I don't care, right? One thing I think the sister said, made a good point. I don't care how you feel about me. You may not like me because I'm Muslim, because I'm black, you may not like anything about me. I don't mind. Here's the thing, you don't have to like me, right? And I'm not saying that because everybody does not have to like everybody else. All you have to do is be respectful, right? Everybody doesn't have to agree with everything I do. I'm not going to go on a campaign and say, this is what Muslims believe, and everybody's not Muslim, must agree with it. You don't have to. Just respect me. Because I'm sure there are things that people do that I don't agree with. Not a lot. I don't go on face and tell them that. And hopefully I don't use it as a way to treat them unfairly. And I think that's the key. Treat each other fairly, regardless of our disagreements and things that we believe that are different. But I tell you all the time, just be prepared. Do your best work, and what is meant for you, you'll get, because it's in the hands of God. It's in the hands of the Creator. All of our success, all of your success, everything we all have comes from one Creator that's not a human being. It's not your boss. It's not the president. So I would say stop watching so much news, and don't go down with the vicissitudes of the day, right? Bad news, good news. My job usually all bad news. Somebody got killed, right? And if I allow that to get me down, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be home somewhere crying to myself over these, atrocious cases. So that's it. Just don't let it bother you.
Thank you. Srikay, I saw your hand, so why don't we get...
Yes. Firstly, I say thank you so much for this vision of our Prophet Muhammad. We always honor the youth. And we know that many stories in the Quran really happen to people when they were youth. The youth of the cave, all the prophets were young men when they first got the mission. So the youth have played a very important part in the ethics and culture of Islam. I want to tell you that I grew up in the 60s. I didn't hear about Islam until like my third year in university. And I'm just so amazed that the people go to junior high school, college, already knowing about Islam, already Muslim. When in our age, we had to struggle hard to find the truth. We had to struggle hard to find Islam. And now it's going to make it so much easier. But what I wanted to ask was, we had in the 60s and 70s certain role models and examples. Other than the stories of the prophets, we had Imam Jamil Abdullah Brown, we had Malcolm X, we had Stokely Carmichael, we had many brilliant leaders and teachers. But I'd like to know today, young people, who are your role models? Who are your icons? Who inspire you?
Great question from Sister Care. Anyone has any names that they want to think about?
Don't be the first slice. But a couple of them I don't know if anyone knows Dr. or soon to be Dr. Camille Rashad, who's I think that's where I know you at, Sister Camille Rashad, there's Dr. Suad, yes,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So those have been, and in addition to that, she's not very well known. My grandma have been like my biggest, role models because they've been the example of what I mean when I say show up and just be present. It was never anything. If you met these women, they're not timid women. They're not shy women. And when they walk into a space to obtain something, they won't leave without it. So those have been like my biggest role models. As far as brothers go, I'm sorry, mine just a bit blank. It's never personal.
I think you mentioned one of them, but for me, of course, one of them is Malcolm X. And sort of to your point, to respectfully disagree with that, disagreeing but to push back, I think in this whole struggle, we're going to need multiple approaches, and I think everybody brings value. And in terms of the bias and the overt/covert racism, Islamophobia, I'm a person who gets angry. I can't. When I see it happen, I'm like, we need to name it. And another role model is my mom. Something she always says, she's a brilliant therapist, is you gotta name it to tame it. So I'm like, we can't deal with this implicit bias if we're not gonna call it out. And so specifically with Malcolm X, why he was so pivotal for me among his legacy and everything was, I felt like he was the first role model that I saw that validated my anger and that made it okay to have righteous anger. And it wasn't just this anger of I'm gonna go destroy things, but it was this anger that's born out of a deep sense of love and justice. And when you see something wrong, I think, one of the mercies of God is that we've been given the ability to process and access so many emotions. And the fact that I can feel angry, it's that's my true north. That's the indicator that there's something wrong and you need to do something about it and we can fix it, but let's be real and acknowledge that we feel some type of way about what's happening because it's not okay. And so yeah, he continues just to be a huge, huge figure in my life. Another one that's local to Philly is Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. Don't tell him I said that because once he gonna get too big. But he has been such an incredible role model to me. Initially in watching him on CNN, because I remember in high school watching him go on and talk about Muslims and debate people, and he was so incredibly intelligent and articulate, and I would just watch and absorb everything he said because I felt like I was being asked the same questions in school, and I was paralyzed by fear because I didn't have the intelligence or information or ability to articulate my argument back. And so in watching him, it was like, oh, we can show up as Muslims and we can talk about these issues and we can be confident in who we are and we can outsmart people who are bigoted and racist. And so in terms of the work that I do in media and communications as well, I saw how powerful what he was doing was for me personally, but also how much it impacted people watching and giving that mainstream access to people who otherwise wouldn't even be thinking about these issues. And then, finally, just the biggest role model for me every single day is my mother. And watching my mom she has always been the person that I've watched who is constantly pursuing truth. And so she's always signing up for a new workshop or a new class. And she went back and got her master's at 40. And she is now a brilliant therapist. And I just see how she moves through the world and how she's constantly searching for truth and how being a Muslim has always been a part of who she is, but it's not, I think to everyone's point here, that's not the only thing that we are, but it's very much weaved into the fabric of who we are and everything that we do. So she's been huge, she's been a model.
I just wanted to comment on the role models. With the camp group, we host a Muslims in the Arts event every year. We just hosted our 5th annual event, and I like to think that my role models are the Muslim artists who we've hosted these events because they, through their art, have really, I think, done a lot to affect social change. The most recent event that we just had was a poetry event a couple weeks ago. We had Husna was actually one of the speakers, one of the presenters, but we also had a couple of other people who spoke at that event. We had Sana Jaffer, who is an elected official in Montgomery Township, New Jersey, and she teaches courses on Islam through South Asian art over in Princeton. And we also had another poet by the name of Shami Online, who also presented. And when you hear their poetry, I think it helps people to see maybe a different side of Muslim culture than what you might be seeing in the media, because you're seeing the emotions, what they're presenting, and they talk about topics like racism, they talk about grief, and they talk about topics like that show you a different side of the Muslim community. But also, like the year before, in 2017, they hosted Farah Siraj, who is a local artist. She's actually a Jordanian singer and writer, and she actually, she's been internationally recognized. She performs every year for the International Day of Peace for the United Nations, and she's performed for King Abdullah. She's known for her message of peace through her music. She is someone who I consider to be a really good role model because of the message of peace that she shares with people. And we've also had people like, we've hosted Saxa Freely back in 2015. He was the winner of the UN Award for Peace and Understanding in 2015, and he's a Muslim artist. He actually was an advertising executive in New York City for a number of years and had created commercials for some pretty big clients like, Mercedes-Benz, Smart Car, things like that. But the reason he won the UN Award for Peace and Understanding that year was because he did a documentary film on the drones that were killing civilians in Pakistan. And we actually have statistics of that event to show that the number of civilians who were being killed by drones significantly decreased after his documentary came out, which was the reason why he won the Award for Peace and Understanding. But the reason I bring that up is because how many people knew that the winner of the UN Award for Peace and Understanding in 2015 was a Muslim artist. And so, again, these are people who we've hosted at the camp events each year for the art event. And these are people who have been internationally recognized for their message of peace. And for me, I think that they have become my role models because of the message of peace that they share. And they're also, helping the rest of the world to see a different side of the Muslim community than what you might be seeing in the media also.
I think you, sir, have a question. Yes, sir.
Yes. Last Friday evening, my wife and I attended a talk at the Franklin Inn Club, old historic social club in Philadelphia. Our speaker was Bunsey Alice Churchill. For over 20 years, she was the head of the World Affairs Council in Philadelphia. And her subject was on Muslim immigration in Europe and in America. She painted a rather bleak and startling picture with all kinds of statistics that surprised all of us. And one of her main points, which was one of the reasons that we were attracted to come to this program this evening to get another point of view, was that Muslim immigration in America in particular, or actually in Europe and in America, increasing at a very rapid rate, and that Muslims fail to be able to assimilate into the American culture or into the European culture. I certainly haven't had that sense from any of the speakers here today. And in further reading in preparation for coming today, I spent a good bit of time on Google and Wikipedia, collected all kinds of information, and found that her assertions seem to be absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Is it not surprising that someone of, the speaker, with all due respect to her, of her stature, right, would buy into unsubstantiated data and arguments, which is not quite surprising for, I suppose, many people on the panel over here. I personally spent quite a bit of my time teaching about Islam, American Muslim history in universities and here in different faith and interfaith settings. And obviously, so one of the things that surprised me is I started asking, so how many Muslims do you think there are in the United States? So I get guesses from anywhere from 60 million to 40 million to 30 million, which, if you look at the peer research institution, the number is 3.45 million, and if you ask anyone in the Muslim community, most likely 6 to 8 million.
It's about 10%, isn't it?
In the United States, only 1% at best, 1 to 2% at best. But similarly, in Europe, people overestimate the number of Muslims. And one of the reasons is there is so much discrepancy between, the reality and the perception, right? And I'm glad that this panel, it wasn't really our intention to do away with stereotypes about Muslims, but has given you a sort of an in-person sense of that correction that you found on your own before coming here.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I would like to ask a question to you, sir.
Yes.
And anybody can answer this question, but it's something I've always wondered. Because I've heard that before. She said that Muslims, immigrants come here and they don't integrate into the American society, American culture. What does that mean? What does it mean to integrate into the American culture?
Everything that I read further today convinced me of the exact opposite.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but man.
I just wanted to jump in here because I'm in my 10th year of working in a school in Chinatown, which was created to honor cultures of immigrants and refugees. And that whole question, assimilation is not our model, but when we teaching social studies now to 7th and 8th graders, but before that, for 8 years, I did English language arts. But my understanding, and one thing that we did toward the end of the year was have the 7th and 8th graders write a poetry, slam poetry, about their ethnic identity. And I think that assimilation comes from that feeling of wiping out anything that isn't traditionally white America. That's my take on it. That you will celebrate 4th of July and you will salute the flag, and that emphasis on will and if you are a good American would be, we're just doing a culture unit now, and we're listing, it's a really great program we found, and we're listing what are the barriers to intercultural understanding, and what is assuming you're all alike. If you are a good American, you would. And the problem with that, the kids are learning, is that assuming we're all alike assumes if you're a good person, you always behave this way. And it erases those differences. And I think that's the problem. I think it's, but it's, you will only be these ways.
Sorry, you want to say something and I will come.
Add on to this experience, because I too heard this talk. The speaker happens to be a friend of ours from way back, kind of thing, but never agreed with her on a political level at all. And her talk was sort of one-sided, I guess, I would think, but I didn't want to challenge her or anything like that. But on the way out, I kind of self-respected or introspected. And I thought, her message was, there's no way of assimilation. There's just no way. And I said, but how about if we, meaning Western world, is some of the blame our fault? Could we be more open and welcoming and all to help assimilate, to our culture? She said, lots of luck. That was her response. So, that's a dead issue in my mind, but I'm posing that question to you. I'm being so introspective.
I think, and I'll allow you guys, but shoes, trades.
Are you saying shoe like a shoe?
So my name is Shuai. Shuai, right? So it's hard. Yeah, shoe. Like S-H-U.
Yeah, all right.
Not O-E.
Okay.
Not S-H-U-B.
Okay.
So his pushback on what does it mean to assimilate is a good question, because discuss, for example, to an African American Muslim, what does it mean to assimilate, right? So I'm just, thinking about, but I would love, our panelists to
This is the question I got asked and challenged on when I was doing the seminar on American history, and I was like, I want to do American Muslim history because everyone wanted to specify some stuff, and it was this question of anti-immigration.
Slow.
Okay. This entire question of integration or assimilation came and everything. Being a trained historian that I am, I looked into previous examples and I argued saying that, well, there was a time when pizza and meatballs and spaghetti were deemed to be non-American foods. Now we have Chicago deep dish and New York style and stuff like that, right? So it has assimilated, it is integrated, it's very much a part of the American culture. If you go to India or Sri Lanka right now and you talk about pizza, although this is wrong, people would say, oh, pizza is from America, right? Because people know pizza because of Pizza Hut and Domino's, right? The same with the hamburger. People wouldn't say that it's from Germany, they would say, oh, it's from the US. Why? Because,
they don't have pizza like we do.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is, the question about integration and assimilation is that it has to be two-way. People need to absorb stuff on that. Always bring up examples from streets in Philadelphia, everything, assimilation, integration has to be Broad Street. It can't be Montgomery Avenue, just one way, and it has to be both ways. And it takes time. It takes time. 50 years from now, 50 years before, people wouldn't have expected to see 4 restaurants and Vietnamese restaurants in Philadelphia, right? But I can say, from 50 years from now and all that, people would know what biryani is or what adana kebab is or something like that. So like I said, going back to the second question, there is still hope. And the positive, the overall, the global kind of integration is going to happen, not just in the US, but everywhere else also.
Can I just make a comment? Alright, so going back to a point of the question that you asked earlier. So my name is Ali, also a pretty difficult name, Muslim American. You asked earlier what gives us hope, right? And to me, our friends here are an example of what gives me hope, right? You've got an example here of people hearing something that you did not feel was right. And you took the time, you made the effort to come out and hear the other side. This to me is the beauty of America, right?
I agree.
And the kind of neighborhood I live in, I see it every day. I see all those posters up, Muslims are welcome, hate is not welcome here. It speaks to me. We have made so many friends just based on that one poster. And people are just so open and willing to sort of have those conversations, right? To see the other perspective. So thank you. People like yourself, give me hope.
I can already feel the passion coming up inside of me, and it's not towards you at all. It's I'm almost wishing that a woman could be here, because I would love to have a conversation with her. Truly, but I genuinely would love to have a conversation with her, and to be able to pose some questions. And growing up in this country, right? I'm American by virtue of the fact that I'm American, and that's period end of that sentence. And so, my first question would be well, what does assimilation mean to you? I was born here. I've never actually been to Libya. I've spent very little time in the Middle East. So, what does it mean to you? And I think phrases and comments like that are a part of that bias that you were asking us about, a few minutes ago. And it's when they say there's no hope of assimilation, what they're talking about really is they're not buying into this casual white supremacist culture. We have to be one way. So, let's name it. Let's call it what it is. It's not about integration and assimilation. It's about stripping away the parts of us that make us quote-unquote different, insofar as we're different in comparison to whiteness or white American culture. And another follow-up question that I would have is in this country, freedom, right? Such a big deal, huge value. But who gets the freedom to be free? Freedom to be ourselves, freedom to be who I am fully and unapologetically. And if your version of freedom means I have to undo a bunch of layers of who I am, whether it's my physical representation or the things that I believe in and not being able to speak those out, then what freedom are we talking about? And so I think it's a slippery slope, and if we're not naming these things as we go, it's really easy to find ourselves in a talk like that, and you're kind of what the hell just happened? I know I'm uncomfortable, but I don't really know how to even begin to engage with this, because there's so many things that we're not naming we're just kind of glossing over it in this acceptable terminology, right? Assimilation sounds nice. It's not as nice when you say strip away your identity and become more like me and less like you.
Can I bring back on that for a second? Not anything you said specifically, but
Your friend, probably a lovely woman.
No.
She doesn't want, she's human being, so she has some.
No, she's not.
Yeah, she's not. Well, that's even more reason what I'm going to say, right? She doesn't want to dialogue. Like, our hope isn't, like I said, people like you. People will hear one side of an argument. I think she's just propaganda, right? She's giving propaganda. And you took that in and said, that doesn't completely make sense. Let me look at those numbers. And you research and came here and you hear real stories from real Muslims who are immigrants, Americans, born here, not born here. So there's no conversation to be had with her. If you ask her many questions, she'll find a reason to disagree with you, right? If you can give her 25,000 examples of people who are immigrants who do celebrate 4th of July, who do celebrate Thanksgiving, who look forward to coming to America and doing it, right? So she knows that. She's not stupid, right? Your friend, you don't have friends that are unintelligent, right? So she knows these things. She knows them to be true. But her business is what? Gathering crowds of people and telling them what they want to hear, right? Because that is
what she wants them.
Yeah. But people go there and hear that. Not everybody left like you and said, let me look this up. Some people left and said, guess what I learned today? I learned that Muslims are coming here in large crowds and they don't want to assimilate and they don't want to do this. They don't want to be Americans. They want us to follow Sharia or however it's pronounced, right? So I think having a dialogue with you, right, you coming here and experiencing this is more beneficial. Because now you're going to go back and say, at the next time you sit with her, she says this, you can say, it's not true. And I know it's not true because I met some people last week and we had a conversation. They were Americans. And guess what? They were Muslims. But they were Americans, right? So if you walk down the street and saw us and we had a conversation, you wouldn't leave and say, wow, those were like weird people. You would say, no, they're Americans. Why? We had a cheesesteak together, right? They were talking about football, baseball. Everything Americans do and talk about, Muslims do and talk about. All the time-wasting things Americans do, Muslims waste time with that. All the issues that Americans have, Muslims have those same issues that live in America. Why? Because this society affects us all, right? So what I meant by what I said earlier about ignoring that, that's a person you're talking to a brick wall. They don't want to hear the truth, right? And if you waste your time with her, you're missing out on you. Right? I can sit and talk to a brick wall about myself while you're standing next to me, but if you can't ask questions, what does it mean? Right? You, like the brother said here, you're the whole. Everybody in this room is the whole actually, right? Everybody in this room makes me smile. This whole organization, if I can answer the first question again, now I'm happy, right? This is something that is beneficial to all of us, and I hope that after you leave here today and after all of them, you go back with a different perspective on what immigrants are. I mean, I'm learning more about different types of Muslims than I used to. Because I grew up in a very insulated community where it was just black Muslims, right? And we all practiced Islam one way. So when he talked about diversity in the religion, I know that when I was younger, when I was in high school. I learned it so maybe in college a little bit because I was still insulated to my own group of friends. So that's my pushback. Don't come at me.
super healthy, just so great. The other point of pushback. I think I agree, particularly in terms of the efficacy of who we engage in conversations with. But I'll add, to me as a young Muslim American, it has always been beneficial to see other people resisting the bully, so to speak, even if they don't win the debate, even if they don't win that person over and convince them. Because I think for me, one of the toughest things is watching unchallenged racism, any ism, right? Whether it's sexism, racism, seeing people say those things and just go unchallenged because they're a lost cause is more disheartening to me than watching one person stand up and see myself in that person and say, you know what, if they can do it, and if they can resist this stuff, then I can do it too.
Thank you. I hate to do this, but yeah, I want to ask you a question because I know you work with that age group that is probably debating what it means to integrate, assimilate. Do you see any experiences, like any hope, and what do you guys do, for example, in your work to empower younger generations to deal with this idea of you don't have to change, you can be who you are, either as a Muslim or as a woman or someone else, and there isn't one way of being an American or one way of being human or one way of being even Muslim. You have to be honest.
So it's an interesting question, and I can give like two different answers to it. I think what comes to mind immediately is that the kids that I work with, from the age of 5 to the age of 18, and even some college students, those kids, they are Muslim, they're American, right? So they pray. Some of them might pray 5 times a day, some of them might be working towards that. And they also like the Eagles. And they also listen to Kendrick Lamar and probably Justin Bieber if they have bad taste in music. So these kids, they go to school in Philadelphia or in the suburbs, right? And they're growing up an American childhood, right? So in many ways, for them, it's they're born Americans, right? Now the question that I think we have to ask is, and a lot of other people on the panel have asked this, is what do we mean by assimilation? And there's this food analogy that's used a lot, and it's very imperfect, right? But in any case, I think it's helpful, and that's the melting pot versus salad bowl kind of thing, right? So the question is, are we all diverse in the sense that we're a melting pot, meaning everybody comes together, right? We blend everything together, and then we're all the same, right? We're the same soup at the end, right? Or can we be a salad bowl where there's a bunch of different stuff in it, and we're still together and we're one, right? And so I think that, if you look at American currency, there's that phrase, a motto, right? Out of many, one, right? And so we can be diverse and we can be different, right? And still be unified, and still, feel like we are American and have a claim to, that identity. So what I mean to say essentially is that, we can be American, right? We can all be American, and yet we can all be different, right? There isn't necessarily one American culture, right? There are many American cultures, right? Yeah, exactly. And I think the kind of implicit assumption often when we talk about assimilation is like assimilating to kind of dominant white culture, and that's. If that's what we mean by assimilation, then we have to say, who wants to assimilate us? I think we have to kind of challenge what that means, right? Do we mean, when we say assimilation, are we saying, that people should kind of let go of everything that they hold dear to kind of conform to a certain standard, right? Or do we mean, integrated? I think integration and assimilation are two very different things. So I don't think I really helped there. I think I just coached more levels.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to finish. Can you just repeat your question? I don't think I answered it, actually.
I think it was relevant. It was more about the youth that you work with and how do you see them group on maybe the same question? You were talking about how they listen to
I think for so, the Muslim American kids that I work with, for them the question is rarely, am I American, right? Because they all, are American, right? But the question more often is, can I be Muslim, right? And that's an unfortunate struggle that we have to deal with, right? When, I work at a Muslim organization, and our goal is to cultivate confident, happy, healthy Muslim Americans, right? We want to nurture them, and then to have them come and question and say, I am American, but I don't really know if I'm Muslim. That's kind of the harder part, and I think it just goes to show that, this question of assimilation, maybe, in my mind, I don't see it as significant, because it's, to me, already given that young American Muslims are American, right? The unfortunate other question is are they going to hold on to their Muslim identity? And I think that's kind of more pressing for a lot of young people.
I think, in me being completely honest, in all of us being completely honest, this country was stolen. So it's like, I'm not going to ask the robbers, how do I be more American? Because you had an opportunity to come here and assimilate to, if you want to be real about American culture, but you stole it. It's like if somebody goes and robs a house, I'm not going to go to them and say, okay, tell me about the house. Or tell me how I can best live in the house. It's not even yours. So it's more so for me, with my identity, I'm going to be my definition of American, and you just going to take it. And we just going to go from there. And if you want problems, we can have that. But I prefer if we wouldn't. But I think, like you said, it's a melting pot, so everyone has their own individual definition of what it means to be American. And, quote unquote, Americans were trying to say, well, that's not accepted here. But they've literally soaked up every ounce of everything that has come here. Whether, black people didn't come here by choice or people who migrated over here. In New York City alone, look how many different restaurants there are. If it's one thing that quote-unquote Americans love, it's other people's food. So I think it's all about defining your own definition of American and putting it out there, and that's just how it's going.
I'll just reflect on, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just, I think there was also a question here.
Just going to make a comment on that question, I guess. Two things, I was thinking a lot as you were talking about assimilation, and one thing I was thinking is, why do white people get, and this is something I puzzled about, why do people get so angry when they see people living their lives, moving in a different culture, like evincing a different culture than them? And one thing that I've heard them reply, like in discussions like that, is like, well, my parents didn't they had to stop here, my dad had a story about my grandmother was smacked across the face because even though she was born in the United States, and spoke Italian when she arrived in kindergarten, and kept smacking her until she stopped and learned English. And stories after this, stories where they were forced to give up the part of their identity to be this model American. And it's almost like this unspoken thing of like, well, we had to give up our culture, they're going to have to give up theirs. It's like almost like a rite of initiation. And it gets some of that, and I think that gets at some of that anger that, there is I think that's another thing, a lot of white people are really resisting hard to getting woke, realizing that it's this thing. Well, because it's threatening to admit that your advantage comes at somebody else's disadvantage. It's threatening, and so they cling to, President Trump, who is kind of a poster child for we're preserving America, which maybe is a person to me, obviously expressing that way. We're preserving, white privilege and white superiority, and so on. And we just look at the language that's continuing, because the go-to articles we're making years now about culture clash, and what we can want is generation, which is just so brittle, so much paper. We've been trained to look at text and stuff, and we're just going to take it apart. And the questions are pretty non-committal, but the kids are raging. I love, and I wanted to say this. think we're sisters in the skin as far as the reach. But I really think that once people it's time not to just be nice. Like, time to be nice is only perpetuating a system. And people need to get called out when they go over. Now, how you do it, I think, to your point, and your point is sometimes it's not the moment. And maybe what you're not going to do is go through the whole litany and give them your 4 articles about white privilege and packing and all that stuff. But maybe just say, like, I think you're off there. Or, I can't agree.
And
I think it's important though, but I think that white people have to start doing it. We keep our mouth shut because it only advantages us, it doesn't advantage the one. Like, when people were just being that way, we gotta go, dinner table, Christmas dinner table, my brother-in-law apologized. He got it.
But it's also, I mean, we are slowly coming to the end of the night, and I see Christopher already like betting. I mean, I want to give the panelists to maybe get a few drinks and a few bites before we leave. So the next 10 minutes we'll wrap up. But one thing that gives me hope and connecting is there are figures like Colin Kaepernick, right, who are calling out some of these, maybe symbols of what we would call American exception. Before him, that was Abdul Rauf, back in the 90s, doing something similar, right? As an NBA player, an American Muslim NBA player. Was coming from a different point of view, but when I talk to people and audiences, I remind them of these parallels and of these histories. Mohammed, maybe this last bit we can start with you. You were talking about how in college you were experiencing and experimenting with identity and all of it. And I promised that we'll talk about frustrations as well. And I believe you talked a little bit about it. But maybe some concluding words on this broader theme of identity, our communities, difference, how we deal with these.
I think what I wanted to highlight, or what I found so interesting about this panel discussion, which I think a lot of people have discussed regarding how diverse we are and so forth, is that, and I think it also piggybacks a little bit on the whole integration assimilation thing. I've never felt the need to assimilate. I've never felt that our community ever needed to assimilate in any way. What I wanted to see growing up in the 80s and the 90s and now currently was I wanted to see our community, and when I say our community, the Muslim community, as diverse as it is, to play more of a part in American culture, in America, whether it's politics, whether it's government, whether it's media, art, and so forth. And I think this goes to hope as well. I think within the last couple of years, there's been a boom of whether it's African American Muslims, Arab Muslims, South Asian Muslims, but I mean the amount of Muslims that have been integral in whether it's art or politics has been, I think, insane, especially how rapid it has become. So in response to your friend's comments, she's clearly been in a bubble because Muslim Americans have been involved and are getting more and more involved in American day-to-day life, more so than ever before, which is great. And it's also from diverse points of views. I mean, you have Aziz Ansari, who's Muslim, but has a very different perspective on Islam and how he practices Islam or whether he doesn't practice Islam compared to other Muslims who are in, whether they're in politics or in art. So all of that was positive and was hopeful. I have two young kids, and they're diverse as well. My wife is Puerto Rican, and so I sit back and I look at this world and I look at what they're entering and what they're going to be experiencing, and I'm pretty sure they're going to have some identity issues as well. But I am also hopeful because I see that they're not the only ones. They're going to have a massive community that surrounds them, that's going to have all kinds of diverse Muslims that are a part of the American fabric. And this conversation regarding assimilation isn't going to be had or necessary at all.
Thank you so much. Maybe I just said that she will actually have to leave soon, the car situation and all. So we'll give the next word to her as maybe 1 minute concluding any remarks if you have.
I just want to say thank you to everyone here. Thank you for coming out. Thank you to this panel. I'm really excited to meet all of you, and sad that I have to go. I just don't want my car to get totaled. It's my car.
It's part of an American experience.
So thank you everyone. Yeah. And I hope to be in touch with folks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I feel like I can go back and relate to my Muslim students with a little bit more ease and a little bit more respect and more understanding from all that you shared. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listener, any concluding words or maybe poetry or anything that you'd like to share with us? Oh my God, so sorry.
I really appreciate you sharing the story of your experience the other day. I think that it's really important that you have the courage to see what is on both sides of the situation. And I just want to bring to the fact that I also think it's important to pass the mic to people. So anyone who ever has the opportunity to put on a panel, making sure that you actually have people with diverse experiences that are represented in the group. And I feel like in the event that you went to had a Muslim American, I feel like it obviously was from a narrow-minded perspective, if that was intentional. But if there had been someone from here alongside your friend, I feel like the perspective would have been a lot different and the takeaways would have been different. But I'm very thankful that you came. And back to the conversation about, or the question of bias and something else, I feel like personally, and you spoke to this a little bit, when I experience any type of bias, it's probably because I'm Black. And if I can kill it, it would probably be because I'm Black, rather than because I'm Muslim. And I think that, I don't know why that is, but I think it speaks to greater structures of hierarchy and power, and the discrimination that I've experienced more so has been within Muslim community spaces that were largely non-Black because I'm Black. And I just wanted to point out that identity is a very layered and complex situation, and we all have very different experiences with the formation of our identities or how we choose to identify ourselves and label ourselves.
You also you had mentioned that diversity as part of your family history, your personal history as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a few comments about assimilation because I really believe that assimilation is inevitable. It's just a question of time and how long it takes. And one example I look at, recently within the past couple of years, both New York City and Philadelphia, those cities have passed, I don't know if it's called a law, but the Eid holiday is now officially recognized on the school calendars, which means that the kids get to have a day off for Eid, just like they would for Christmas or those other traditional holidays.
Sorry, you mean the Eid is the two Muslim holidays through the year. EID. It's like two Muslim major religious festivals, holidays.
Right, so Eid would be kind of to the Islamic faith what Christmas is to the Christian faith. It's one of the major holidays. And 20 years ago, for a Muslim kid to get that day off at school, the parents would have to go in and actually explain to the school what a holiday was and that they needed the child to be out of school. But now, in both New York City and Philadelphia, it's just automatically recognized on the calendar now. I mean, I don't know other cities in the country if they've done it yet, but I think that it's coming. I think this was the beginning of it. So I think that that's an example of, it's probably taken all these years to get to that point, but just the fact that the Eid holiday is now being recognized in two major cities on the school calendar is an example of assimilation, because now other cultures will begin to recognize that holiday and they'll be starting to understand what it is. And just speaking from my own experience in the camp group, we have Muslim professionals who range from their mid-20s all the way up to the middle age, like 40s and 50s, and it's funny, if you talk to Muslim Americans who are in their 40s and 50s, and you compare their stories to Muslim Americans who are in their 20s, you could see that there's been a shift in lifestyle. I mean, I see nowadays Muslim women, Muslim girls play sports, and I'm not saying they didn't do that 20 years ago, but not as much as what I see now. I talk to young Muslims all the time who went to the prom, and it's not a big deal. I wasn't allowed to go. I mean, that was like a forbidden thing. I mean, and now it's no big deal. There's a lot of, there are still families who don't allow it, but there's a lot of Muslim kids who do go to the prom, and it's not really as big a deal as what it used to. And when I look at clothing, I was shocked when I came to the East Coast. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up in this little bubble, Indian and Pakistani group that was more conservative. And honestly, some of the clothing styles that I saw young Muslim women wearing on the East Coast, I would have never been allowed to wear. They're wearing dresses where, if I wore a dress, it had to be floral. You couldn't really have any of your legs showing off. Muslim Americans are dressing very Western now, and that was something I got used to when I came to the East Coast, because it wasn't like that in the little bubble that I grew up in. So there's definitely been a shift, I would say, in the last 20, 30 years in Muslim Americans, just lifestyle, clothing, social activities. The arranged marriage thing still happens, but not in the same way it did 20, 30 years ago. And Muslim Americans have a very different cultural identity than Muslims in other countries now because of the shift. So there's dating, I didn't see it as often when I was growing up, but it's a lot more now than what it used to be. So there's definitely a shift that's taken place. Maybe it took 20, 30 years, but there has been a shift. Like someone else was like, I've been in another 20 years. I wonder, what the shift will be, but there's definitely been a shift. I definitely see.
Let's go this way. Last brief remarks.
I would just say thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for coming and being involved in the conversation. I definitely do agree completely with what she said. It's the way I've seen things evolve for Muslims, in the last few years, and I'm only 22. So I can only imagine, what's to come next. And going back to what they said about what makes me hopeful is I see so many Muslim children now who have so many things to do. There's so many things they're doing, and they're not apologetic about any of their identities, which I think is a really good thing. I have a little brother who's 9, and he's watching everything that I'm doing. So now he's my little mini. He's jumping up here. But I think I'm just remaining very hopeful for the future. I'm glad everyone is listening and paying attention, because we do have a place in America and American society, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Just one brief point. Islam is like any other religion. It has rules and regulations that outline your life. And it's given human beings. If you accept it, then you're going to be human being. You're going to do things that you're not supposed to do things you are supposed to do, right? And that's what this religion is about. People have choices, right? You're going to either do it or not do it. So, just like any other religion, I wouldn't call that assimilation, I just call that life, right? That's what it is. But before I go, the sister asked about role models. You're my role model. And the brother next to you is my role model, because any Muslim in this city, right, that can walk around and be Muslim unapologetically and without fear, that's because you guys did it when it wasn't that easy, right? When it wasn't Muslims everywhere, right? So it's because of people like you that we can have these types of events, and it's people like you that went through the struggle of not only being African American at a time when it was really rough, but also being Muslim, like differentiating yourself even more, and especially you, sister, covering your hair, right? It might be normal now, but back then it wasn't, right? You were really different, standing out. So You ask about role models, people like you, my mother, my father, brother, those are the role models that everybody in the city should be looking up to. We don't know your name, but we know one person, or I won't say one person, we know somebody who does, right?
Well, let me say, you guys know this is Brother Carlton Sackfield, he's the first Muslim lawyer.
That's a role model.
Yeah, and we are honored to have the Cardinal for CAIR-Philadelphia and benefit from his advice and his years in different cities, but mostly in
Once again, thank you so much for having me over here. There's a lot of experience in everyone around here. I don't even know if I belong over here, but thanks for having me over here. One of the suggestions I would tell everyone is like, when you have questions about Islam, Muslim people, and things like that, pretty sure if you go on a college campus in Philadelphia, you'll find lots of Muslims. Encourage them, and even in high schools, encourage them to make friends with Muslim people, have a conversation. But that person probably is not going to be a theologian or something like that, but you would learn from experiences and stuff like that. Also, this is what I do for my work. That's like, next week is the last week to get registered to vote before the midterms. So I encourage everyone to get registered if they already know. So, do that. 9th of October is the deadline.
Yeah, absolutely want to thank everyone for being out tonight, everyone up here on this panel, and I think piggybacking a little bit off of Shai's point, when I was thinking about the theme of like what frustrates you, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is this idea of like the first Muslim blank who does something. And I know a lot of people find it inspiring, but I got kind of tired of that narrative because I'm no longer interested in the first person to do it, but for two reasons. One, because I'm more interested in how we're making it sustainable so that we can continue to do these things. And to the second point, which you were touching on, I think it just sets up such a false narrative. And, you know, anyone who's the first person to be able to do something, if they're part of the minority community, is because of the previous generations who put in all of the work and who made it possible for us to get to where we're at. So I really appreciate you calling that out. I know this panel is focused on young Muslim experience, but the thing that I'm most excited about and truly hopeful about now is the intergenerational work that we can be doing and the conversations. And I'm hopeful when I see my peers honoring our elders and honoring the people that came before us in the community, because there's just such a wealth of knowledge, and I think we get stuck in this trap of talking about and to our elders as if their work is done and like now we're here to pick it up, and that's just not the case. I mean, we're all continually participating, contributing, and so I so appreciate your presence here, and I feel so grounded, and everyone who's in this room, and so thank you to everyone who came and asked really thoughtful questions. I really blessed to be here. So.
Okay. Thank you so much to everyone over here. Thank you so much to Christopher, to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. I think we are a little bit over our time, and I know that the building is going to get closed. Before we go, I want to remind that we are going to make hopefully the recording of this session and the recording of the previous session that we did with the elder community leaders on the history of Muslim Pennsylvanians available. Inshallah, we will talk with Christopher on what's the best way to do that, and we'll be in touch with you all. But we really appreciate you all giving your time, your voice, and to all of you for coming, for listening. Thank you so very much, Christopher. Thank you so much.